Should I allow negative comments about my online program or business inside of my community? I'm going to tell you why I think that you should allow those negative comments and the risk you take when you don't. And maybe I'll also share some reasons that you wouldn't want to allow them. But either way, it's important that you make a decision. So let's do that in this episode. I was recently interviewed by Sam Ovens, the founder of schoolwithak.com, and we had over a 3-hour chat on community. Now, one of the things that came up, which is really not uncommon, was the question of, should I allow negative posts about me, my business, my program or service inside of my community? This is a really important question that always comes up. And hopefully, as you're working on your culture and your guidelines, you're addressing it then so that you're thinking about it proactively. But usually what happens is we think about this reactively when someone posts something negative and we aren't sure how to respond, or you or a team member removes it really quick by default, which maybe causes even more issues. Okay, I know you're going to want a cut and dry answer for this. But that's not how this is going to work. And if you've listened to me for any amount of time, you probably guessed that. I am going to help you decide what's right for your community so that the next time you encounter this, you have a game plan. Okay, before we go on, I want to clarify what I mean by negative comments. This can be very subjective, right? So negative comments could be complaints or criticism about the program or business. It could be a direct attack or accusation about the business owner or another community member. It could be issues or drama in the community like religion or politics or whatever it might be, or comments that challenge or contradict the community's culture around things like religion, politics, bullying, etc. For our purposes specifically in this conversation, I'm talking about complaints or criticisms about the business or the program. So not anything that's an obvious removal, bullying, direct attacks, or anything like that. This is where someone in the program isn't happy with what's going on or isn't satisfied with the program and takes the community to talk about it, whether they're having an issue with customer support or they think there's a missing feature or they didn't like the latest training or whatever it is. Maybe you're like most people and you're thinking, well, of course you delete those, Shana. And you may have a point. Allowing negative comments can have its downsides. Negative comments can escalate conflict among members. It can impact others' opinion about the program or the brand, and it can distract from the main topic of conversation inside of your community. But I would argue that in many cases, these negative comments should actually be allowed. Silencing comments doesn't change the truth about your program. So I often see it as an opportunity to learn what you can do to improve and better serve your community. And what happens a lot, if you have a great program, your community is often going to address that negative comment before you even need to. And sometimes that show of support from your community can have like an equal and opposite reaction, if you will, of positive impact inside of your community. You should especially consider allowing negative comments in a few different situations. If your community exists to support in the creation or improvement of a product, for example, like Sam and his school.com community, then you would want to make sure to allow those comments because that's the purpose of the community. It's created to express the needs, the wants, to provide feedback so that they can contribute to making the product better. If your community has a really high value of honesty and transparency, you want to make sure that you're not hiding negative comments, but instead you're modeling how to handle them gracefully so that you can further encourage an open and authentic atmosphere and dialogue in your community. You really don't want to be perceived as sweeping things under the rug. If you have a very strong culture of kindness and respect, and you have lots and lots of raving fans, then allowing negative comments is probably not a bad idea. Your members are often going to show up in full support and do so without tearing the original poster down, which is always a concern. With that culture, you can provide healthy boundaries within which negative feedback can be shared. But too often, we want to silence the negative feedback rather than listening, considering the validity of that feedback, and potentially addressing the root cause of the issue. Now, if it's a one-off issue, it will come and go with very little attention, so you don't need to be concerned about that. But if it's a recurring theme and the post explodes with Me Too people, then you'd want to know. At least I would want to know so that I can make those improvements in my program before people cancel. That being said, it does take a strong community culture to welcome this kind of negative feedback. But hopefully you've taken my community training program and you have a thriving community culture, so you're not worried about that. Either way, there are still some times that not allowing negative feedback about the program in the community group is the better choice. So let's talk about those, because I have a few clients that don't allow negative comments, and I'm okay with that because of the situation that they're in, the kinds of people that they serve, or what their program is all about. So let's talk about those situations. When you are cultivating a very positive culture within your community, that's an upbeat place on the internet, high vibe, as some would say, and you're seeking to protect people from the complaints and negativity that they typically find online, you probably don't want to allow negative comments. This would be a place that's trying to be very supportive and uplifting, and negative feedback can undermine that goal. If you're dealing with people who are emotionally vulnerable or processing through a sensitive subject matter, in those situations, it can actually lead to more volatility in their own emotions and life if you allow negative comments, because they will either want to attack or defend, which doesn't create connection among your members and can break the safety that you've worked hard to establish. When you have community members who are in a coaching environment where they're doing a lot of thought work to help them reach a specific goal, and you want your community to be solely focused on that without distractions that could derail them, you may not want to allow negative comments. When you have a community where you don't really moderate it very often for whatever reason, and you know that any negative feedback or just general feedback about your program that they would share would probably get missed or lost, then you don't want to leave that as a forum for sharing that negative feedback. I'm sure you could come up with 10 more reasons why you don't want to allow negative feedback in your community. But I want you to assume that you should allow negative comments, and then ask yourself, what would allowing them make possible? And if you were to allow them, what would you need to do differently to maintain the brand and the culture? But I also want you to think about, if you decide not to allow them, is what channel you have open to your members for them to provide that feedback. You can't and shouldn't shut it out completely, because when people have negative feedback and we can learn about that early on, not only can we make improvements in the program, but we can potentially rectify it so that that person doesn't cancel. So you want to have a channel for that kind of communication. Most importantly, what I don't want you to do is make a decision out of fear or uncertainty. We are cultivators, and cultivators are intentional about the decisions we make when it comes to our community. So take time this week to think through this decision and decide what's best for your business and community when it comes to negative comments.